Welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got questions for you. A lot of questions for you. Could be about anything, anytime. So let's have some fun learning stuff, shall we? All right, let's begin. What was the name of the failed 1961 military operation to overthrow Fidel Castro's government in Cuba? Was it the Battle of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion, or the Cuban invasion? It was the Bay of Pigs invasion. Which song, sang by Dana, won the Eurovision Song Contest 1970 for Ireland? All Kinds of Everything, Waterman, or Marie Blanche? And that would be All Kinds of Everything. Which U.S. state hosted the first Super Bowl in 1967? Was it California, South Carolina, or Colorado? The first Super Bowl was held in the state of California. Which London observatory was chosen as the defining point of the Prime Meridian? Was it the Norman Fisher Observatory, the Hampstead Astronomical, or the Royal Greenwich Observatory? And that was the Royal Greenwich Observatory, hence Greenwich Mean Time. Who is the Dutch author behind the children's book Journey Through the Night, released from 1951 to 1958? Was it Johan Kivet, Annie Schmidt, or Anne de Vries? It was Anne de Vries. Who was the U.S. president responsible for signing the Marshall Plan in 1948? Was it Harry S. Truman? Was it John F. Kennedy? Or was it Lyndon B. Johnson? The Marshall Plan was signed by Harry S. Truman. Which 1965 American musical drama film stars Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer? Was that Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, or No Man's Land? Well, of course, it was The Sound of Music. The classic. Who introduced the notion of micro black holes in 1971? Was it Kazuo Hashimoto, Sheldon Glashow, or Stephen Hawking? That was a concept introduced by Stephen Hawking. Which year marks the founding of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO? 1949, 1950, or 1948? NATO was founded in 1949. Which species of monkey was the first primate in space aboard the U.S. V-2 rocket in 1949? Rhesus macaque monkey, capuchin monkey, or night monkey? And the first species was the rhesus macaque monkey in space. Which American painter created the Jewish theme works Abraham, 1949, and Uriel, 1954? Barnett Newman, Mark Rothko, or Willem de Kooning? That was Barnett Newman. What were the start and end years of World War II? 1940 to 46, 1939 to 1945, or 1938 to 1944? The start and end years were 1939 to 1945. Which former member of the Beatles released the solo hits Say 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 and Pipes of Peace? Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, or was that John Lennon? And that was Paul McCartney. Which country shares land borders with the United States to the north? Hawaii, Mexico, or Canada? Country shares land borders with the United States to the north. Canada. Canada is to the north. Which of the following is not among the U.S. Big Three auto companies? The Chrysler Corporation, the Ford Motor Company, or the Volkswagen Group? The Volkswagen Group. They're made in Deutschland. In what year was the European Broadcasting Union founded? 1950, 1951, or 1952? The European Broadcasting Union was founded in 1950. Which Stephen King horror short story recounts the tale of Gary, a 9-year-old boy? Danse Macabre, The Shining, or The Man in the Black Suit? That would be The Man in the Black Suit. Which 1944 agreement established a fully negotiated monetary order to govern monetary relations among independent states? The monetary system, the Bretton Woods system, or the Jamaica Accords? That would be the Bretton Woods system. Which treaty imposed territorial losses, severe military restrictions, and reparations against Germany after World War I? Was that the Treaty of Versailles, the Treaty of Trianon, or the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye? It was the Treaty of Versailles. Where was the world's first nuclear power plant opened in 1954? Obninsk, Russia, Lancashire, UK, or Arizona, the United States of America? The world's first nuclear power plant was opened in Obninsk, Russia. What American traditional song was a primary inspiration of Chuck Berry's first big hit, Maybelline? Cotton-Eyed Joe, Ida Red, or Sourwood Mountain? That would be Ida Red. Peanuts is an American comic strip written and animated by whom? Hank Ketchum, Charles M. Schulz, or Osamu Tezuka? And Peanuts is a comic strip written by Charles M. Schulz and drawn. Which Renault model was the first French car to win European Car of the Year award? The Renault Frigate, the Renault 4, or the Renault 16? And the first model was the Renault 16. Which 1970 American romantic drama stars Ally McGraw and Ryan O'Neal? Peyton Place, Love Story, or Romeo and Juliet? And that would be Love Story. The American band B-52s derived their name from which 1960s hairdo? The Beehive, the Flicked style, or the Chignon hairstyle? They got it from the Beehive. The Beehive 52s. Look, Mickey is a 1961 oil painting by which American pop artist? Was that created by Willem de Kooning, Roy Lichtenstein, or David Hockney? Look, Mickey was created by Roy Lichtenstein. In what year was the first diet drink Tab introduced by the Coca-Cola Company? 1953, 1963, or 1973? Tab was produced in 1963. Which two countries share territorial water borders with Florida, USA in the southeast? Cuba and the Bahamas, Cuba and Hawaii, or Cuba and the ABC Islands? And that would be Cuba and the Bahamas. Who became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom after the resignation of Winston Churchill in 1955? Was it Anthony Eden, Clement Attlee, or was it Margaret Thatcher? Following Churchill's resignation, it was Anthony Eden. In which year did Elvis Presley release his first gold album titled Elvis Presley? Was it 1956, 1955, or 1954? And that was released in 1956. Which 1942 battle was fought by the United States and Philippine Commonwealth against Imperial Japan? The Battle of Bataan, the Battle of the Midway, or the Battle of Alamein? It was the Battle of Bataan. What comes next after the famous Golden Grain Macaroni Company jingle, Rice-A-Roni? The West Coast Treat, the San Francisco Treat, or the San Diego Treat? Rice-A-Roni, the San Francisco Treat, they used to say. Which popular music ballad contains the lyrics, "See the pyramids along the Nile"? Is that You Belong to Me, The Banks of the Nile, or Proud Mary? Those are lyrics from You Belong to Me. When did the Great Alaskan Earthquake happen across south-central Alaska? 1965, 1963, or was it 1964? It was 1964. Which 1954 Aldous Huxley's autobiography book elaborates his psychedelic experience under the influence of mescaline? The Doors of Perception, A Brave New World, or Island? The Doors of Perception. In which country were the Helsinki Accords signed in 1975? Finland, Germany, or the United States? And the Helsinki Accords were signed in Helsinki, Finland. The first successful surgical operation of conjoined twins happened in which year? Was it 1960, 1952, or was it 1956? The first successful operation took place in 1952. Psycho, a 1960 American horror, was produced and directed by whom? Was it Alfred Hitchcock, Stephen King, or William Castle? Psycho was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. What is the largest international airport serving the United Kingdom? Is it Gatwick Airport, Manchester Airport, or is it London Heathrow Airport? And of course, it's London Heathrow Airport. In which year did the United States join World War II against the Axis? Was it 1935, 1941, or 1938? The United States entered in 1941. Which daily syndicated newspaper comic strip was originally written and illustrated by Hank Ketchum? Was it the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Dennis the Menace, or was it Peanuts? Hank Ketchum created Dennis the Menace. In what year did Martin Luther King Jr. receive the Nobel Peace Prize for his leadership of nonviolent protests to racial discrimination? Was it 1964, 1968, or 1958? He received the Peace Prize in 1964. Who was the UK Prime Minister during the 1973 oil crisis incident? Was it Edward Heath, Anthony Eden, or Richard Nixon? It was Edward Heath. What is the name of the first person to land on the moon in 1969? Was it Neil Armstrong, Valentina Tereshkov, or Yuri Gagarin? Of course, that was Neil Armstrong. It was a small step for him. Which American singer and actress sang the songs Mambo Italiano and Boccia Me? Was that Peggy Lee, Rosemary Clooney, or Julie London? That was Rosemary Clooney. What major battle was fought on the Eastern Front of World War II when the Axis attacked the Soviet Union for control of a city? The Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle of Berlin, or the Battle of Alamein? It was the Battle of Stalingrad. What landmark in the United States is the largest contiguous endorheic watershed? The Great Basin, the Grand Canyon, or is it Death Valley? It is the Great Basin. Which French novella was published in English in the U.S. by Reynal and Hitchcock in April 1943? Flight to Arras, Romeo and Juliet, or The Little Prince? And that would be The Little Prince. Which medical assessment tool predicts the risk of a patient to develop pressure ulcer? Braden scale, pressure scale, or Glasgow Coma scale? And that would be the Braden scale. What U.S. city hosted the 15th Academy Awards ceremony in 1943? Was that Los Angeles, Las Vegas, or was it New York City? The 15th in 43 was hosted in Los Angeles. Who succeeded Joseph Stalin as premier and first secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1953? George Malenkov, Nikita Khrushchev, or Nikolai Bulganin? It was Georg Malenkov. What year was the Lincoln Continental limousine involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy manufactured? 1964, 1961, or 1962? And that would be 1961. What is the name of the fictional all-American town that serves as a setting for the 1946 holiday classic, It's a Wonderful Life? Amity Island, Bedford Falls, or North Bath? That would be Bedford Falls. Which British fashion designer opened her boutique Bazaar on Kings Road in 1955? Christian Dior, Mary Quant, or Coco Chanel? And that would be Mary Quant. Which dystopian novel published in 1949 by George Orwell introduced the concept of newspeak? Why I Write, 1984, or was it Animal Farm? And that would be 1984. What artistic movement, known for its spontaneous and subconscious creation, was pioneered by artists like Jackson Pollock? Would that be oil painting, pop art, or abstract expressionism? That would be abstract expressionism. Which U.S. president famously said, "Ich bin ein Berliner," in a 1963 speech? John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, or Richard Nixon? That was John F. Kennedy. Which soul singer, known as the Queen of Motown, recorded the hit Respect in 1967? Was that Aretha Franklin, Rosa Parks, or Peggy Lee? R-E-S-P-E-C-T. That's Aretha Franklin. Which U.S. government agency was established in 1958 in direct response to the Soviet launch of Sputnik? Was it NASA, NATO, or Space Energy? Of course, that's NASA. What 1967 U.S. film starring Dustin Hoffman features the famous line, "Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to seduce me?" The Graduate, Rain Man, or Hook? That would be The Graduate. What was the name of the iconic U.S. denim brand that popularized blue jeans as youth fashion in the 1950s? Hollister, Levi's, or was that American Eagle? Of course, that was Levi's. Which British luxury car brand, known for its Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament, was acquired by Volkswagen in 1998? Was that Mercedes-Benz, Rolls-Royce, or BMW? That was Rolls-Royce. Which city in Scotland is bound to the north by Firth of Forth and to the south by Pentland Hills? Belfast, Cardiff, or Edinburgh? And that would be Edinburgh. Which American folk singer's song, Blown in the Wind, became an anthem for the civil rights movement? Was that Bob Dylan, Stevie Wonder, or Aretha Franklin? The answer, my friend, is Blown in the Wind. The answer is Bob Dylan. In what year did the Watergate scandal begin? 1972, 1971, or 1973? That whole mess started in 1972. What was the name of the popular UK series that debuted in the 1960s, starring Patrick Macnee as John Steed? Doctor Strange, James Bond, or was it The Avengers? And that is The Avengers. In what year was the first demonstration of the computer mouse? 1971, 1965, or 1968? And that would be 1968. Which American artist became famous for his paintings of Campbell's soup cans in the 1960s? Was that Andy Warhol, Mark Rothko, or Willem de Kooning? That was Andy Warhol painting soup cans. What was the name of the first video game console that could be played on home television? Released in 1972. Mario Kart, the Magnavox Odyssey, or was it Space War? And that was the Magnavox Odyssey. What was the name of the popular British children's TV show that featured creatures who lived on Wimbledon Common? The Wombles, Wimbledon Town, or Common Town? Well, it only makes sense. It's the Wombles. Which British shoe brand, known for its classic desert boots, became a staple of casual wear in the 60s? Clarks, Manfield, or Dulces? I want desert shoes. Well, desert shoes. They were Clarks. No, I'm hungry. Which American sports car, first introduced in 1953, is known by the animal it was named after? The Chevrolet Corvette, the Jaguar, or the Volkswagen Beetle? And that would be the Chevrolet Corvette. Which American poet and novelist wrote the controversial 1951 novel, The Catcher in the Rye? Was that J.D. Salinger, Roy Lichtenstein, or Pamela Travers? Catcher in the Rye was written by J.D. Salinger. When a body meets a body coming through the rye. What is the name of the iconic 1972 photograph of a mother and her child fleeing a napalm attack during the Vietnam War? The Terror of War, Vietnam Girl, or Aftermath? That was The Terror of War. In the 1975 film Jaws, what is the name of the shark-hunting boat captained by Quint? Was it the Orca? Was it Betty? Or was it called the Sniper? It was called the Orca. Which American fast food chain was famous for its golden arches, was founded by Ray Kroc in 1955? McDonald's, Wendy's, or Popeyes? Oh, the golden arches. Of course, that's McDonald's. What was the title of the Beatles' 1967 album that was one of the first rock concept albums? Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, A Doll's House, or Beatles 65? And that was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. What is the name of the 1930s environmental disaster in the U.S. caused by severe drought and poor farming practices? Was that the Greatest Drought, the Environmental Drought, or did they call it the Dust Bowl? It was called the Dust Bowl. Which UK Prime Minister famously declared, "Peace for our time," after returning from Munich in 1938? Clement Attlee, Anthony Eden, or Neville Chamberlain? And that would be Neville Chamberlain. Which British novelist created the fictional character James Bond in 1953? Was that Roger Moore, Ian Fleming, or Sean Connery? And that was Ian Fleming. Which U.S. president was in office during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Was it Richard Nixon, John F. Kennedy, or Lyndon B. Johnson? And that was John F. Kennedy. Which American jazz and blues trumpeter appeared in the film A Rhapsody in Black and Blue in 1932? Louis Armstrong, Jimmy Jones, or Louis Jordan? Rhapsody in Black and Blue, Louis Armstrong. In which year did Queen Elizabeth II come into power after the death of her father? Was it 1951, 1952, or was it 1953? Elizabeth II became queen in 1952. The Walt Disney World Resort is an entertainment complex located 20 miles southwest of which U.S. state? Florida, Arizona, or California? That would be Florida. In which year did the Rolling Stones release their ninth album, Sticky Finger? 1970, 1972, or 1971? And that would be 1971. Which 1948 British film, an adaptation of Shakespeare play, was both directed by and starred Laurence Olivier? Hamlet, As You Like It, or was it Othello? It was Hamlet. In 1947, what was the first helicopter certified for civilian use in the United States? Was it a Bell 47, a Bell 30, or a Bell 40? That helicopter was a Bell 47. Which Soviet Union field marshal led the Red Army during the Battle of Berlin in 1945? Was it Erich Manstein, Erwin Rommel, or Georg Zhukov? And that was Georg Zhukov. Who hosted the radio show Hour of Decision from 1950 to 1954? Was that Billy Graham, Cliff Barrows, or Will Graham? The Hour of Decision. That was hosted by Billy Graham. What was the capital city of the U.S. before its relocation to Washington, D.C.? Was it Philadelphia, Virginia, or New York City? Just before D.C., the capital was in Philadelphia. What was the model of the car President John F. Kennedy was riding in during his assassination in 1963? Was it a Lincoln Continental, an Imperial Crown, or a Phantom 5? President Kennedy was riding in a Lincoln Continental convertible. Marilyn Diptych is a 1962 silkscreen print by which American pop artist depicting Marilyn Monroe? Mark Rothko, Andy Warhol, or Jackson Pollock? And that was created by Andy Warhol. In what year did Wernher von Braun publish his first series of articles titled Man Will Conquer Space Soon? 1958, 1952, or 1964? 1952. And we're yet to conquer it. Which 1961 American romantic comedy film starring Audrey Hepburn was directed by Blake Williams? Breakfast at Tiffany's, Days of Wine and Roses, or Blind Date? And that would be Breakfast at Tiffany's. What is the main reason that led to the end of the Cold War in 1991? Was it the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or was it the signing of the Treaty of Versailles? It was the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Which novelist is credited for his Rabbit novel series that follow the life of Harry Rabbit Engstrom? John Updike, Wright Morris, or Thomas Pynchon? And that would be John Updike. What was the first computer video game to be invented in 1962? Space War, Pac-Man, or Mario Kart? The first video game to be invented in 1962? Space War. Who was the lead singer of American vocal pop group The Ink Spots? Was it Billy Kenny, Hoppy Jones, or Charlie Fuqua? The lead singer was Billy Kenny. What agreement formalized the surrender of Japan, marking the end of hostilities during World War II? The Instrument of Surrender, the Treaty of Japan, or the Treaty of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? And that would be the Instrument of Surrender. What is the largest religious life of United Kingdom citizens? Christianity, Islam, or no religion at all? The largest religious influence of the United Kingdom? Christianity. And that's it. That's 100 questions. That's all I've got for you. And you've done an amazing job. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and drop your score in the comments, please. We love to hear from you.